Classroom. Yes. Okay. Okay, class expectations. I guess like you guys probably know class expectations, what you need to do considering there's only 6 classes until you guys will be ready to take the exam. But you have to take a lot of notes. If you've done level 9 history online, you know that you have access to other tabs on your computer when you're doing the exam. You have access to your notes and things like that. I recommend you make notes of what we're going to learn, what you see in the textbook on Google Docs. So during the exam, you can easily like find what you're looking for instead of like flipping through a lot of pieces of paper. It's just way easier online, but I don't really care just as long as you're taking notes, you're being attentive, okay, and you're completing homework on time. I won't go through any of this, but last thing, there are required pieces for history, obviously, like you know. And if you don't listen to them, you're not going to pass. Okay, I'm sorry, but that's just the reality because like 20% of your grade, I'll go through this later, is part of like the listening portion. And if you just don't know the songs, you will not be able to answer the questions and it'll be kind of like a dire situation. Okay, awesome. So let's do a quick introduction to level 10 history. I won't spend more than like 5 minutes on this, but the first thing I want to outline is that I posted a syllabus on the Google Classroom. I'll post it in the homework as well. You need to either save that to your computer or you need to print it out. That will help you so much during the exam when you just need the really key words when you're writing stuff, when you're looking at questions, okay? So syllabus, I'll remind you guys later, but you must print it out. It must be at your disposal during the exam. Okay. So obviously you guys, wait, I'll just ask everyone, starting with who I see first. Emily, when did you do level 9 history? Like recently, a month ago?
Um, I think I did it like 2 months ago.
Okay, so it's okay, that's not bad at all. And Jesse, when did you do level 9 history?
Yeah, like 1.5 months or something like that. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Oh,
something like that.
okay, awesome. And Coco, when did you do level 9?
I did it online and I'm pretty sure it was like around last year, this year, July.
Oh, cool. So yeah, that's not bad at all. And Kathleen, when did you do level 9 history?
Um, November.
November? Oh, cool. Okay, so that's like really recent. So it's fresh in most people's brains. Oh, here comes Belle. Okay, awesome. So you guys, yeah, even if you did it quite a few months ago, you have some sort of knowledge about it. Really quickly, hi Belle, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Okay. Hello. So you're like 6 minutes late, but we went through a lot. We basically went through um different things, what you're gonna learn in this class, how we're gonna do it. Like I'm gonna get through more stuff later, but we haven't learned anything about history, just like the course outline and things like that. Okay.
Okay,
Um
thanks.
and Belle, are you on the Google Classroom?
No.
Okay, I'll send you the code later. Let me just remind myself. Okay, perfect. And the Google Classroom will have everything, Belle, so I'll make sure to send it to you. But anyways, let's continue talking about the differences between level 9 and level 10. Because actually level 10 is not much easier, but it is easier than level 9 because there's more emphasis on genres rather than pieces. It's really tedious to learn like every single detail about pieces, but when you're learning more about the genres, it's just much easier for it to like sink in, much easier for you to like learn it and things like that. You'll also be doing a lot of comparative essays. When I did my level 10 and with all my friends who did level 10, all of their essays were comparative. So it was like comparing Mozart to Beethoven, comparing the Middle Ages to Renaissance, comparing sacred to secular music. Obviously, I'll teach you all that later, but you will be doing a lot of comparison essays. So in the homework, get ready to do comparison based essays. I'll obviously tell you my tips on how to write them. Okay. And obviously, it's less modern eras. I'm pretty sure in level 9, you literally learned about the modern era, which was interesting. Um, we actually learned a bit of these eras. Yeah, yeah. In music, yeah, exactly. Yeah, good, Jesse. So like the Baroque era, if you don't know what that is, I would be a little bit concerned, but because that's like you're level 10 now, you should know that, but you will have a brief like recollection of things that we will learn. In level 9 history, you will probably remember some of the things. There is a lot of parallels, but yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Good, Jesse. So yeah, there's less modern eras. It's about older times. And just like a heads up, the music that you will listen, or the pieces rather, that you'll listen to, they are very interesting. Okay. They're mostly like religious pieces, very they're not like dark, but they're very a little bit eerie. So get ready for that. And then the composers are less important, but still present in the exam. You'll have like 5 questions about composers, but it's more about like the pieces they wrote and their contributions rather than like who they are and like what they did. Okay, awesome. Okay, how this class will work. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is obviously going to be a very fast-paced class, right? We only have 6 classes before the exam. I'm very confident in all of you guys, despite not really knowing who you are, that you'll be able to do the exam and do well. If, of course, you take a lot of notes, you do all of the homework. And I will ask a lot of you for the homework, just because it's winter break, and I know it's like the holidays and things, but um, if if you're willing to put in the work, you will get good grades. And I'm willing to grade all the homework I assign to you, which is going to be quite a bit. So this is just the overview of the first 6 classes. The first 3 is really learning based. We'll learn all about the eras. There's only 4, but there's just so much to unpack in each of them. And then the last 2 questions, I'm aiming for them to just be practice tests. You guys like spend the class doing practice tests, doing reviews, like a quiz of the first 4 units, like key points, Q&A, and then bunch of practice tests, just so you guys are a-okay and you have a firm understanding of the subject matter. Okay. Does anyone have any questions so far? Just throw them in the chat or you can unmute and ask. No questions? Okay, awesome. Am I like, do you guys understand what I'm saying? Am I talking too fast? Do you guys think like, is there anything wrong? Just say like yes or no.
No, it's okay.
No? Okay. Because obviously I just really want to get through, like, this is not important stuff. This is not going to like make you pass the exam. It's just what I'm going to do to help you succeed. And I just want to spend really like some brief time on it. Okay, so folks, let's start with our like first class. It's going to be on, or the first unit rather. It's going to be on the Middle Ages, okay? These dates here, honestly, they don't test you on it. I just thought it would be cool. Before I move on, if you guys all have your textbooks, I want you to flip to the glossary. So it's page 144. And just give me confirmation that you can see the textbook, you can see page 144. Just like throw it in the chat if you can, if you can see the glossary, you can see the page. Yes, cool. Only one person. Awesome. So I'm not sure how you did in level 9, but how I'm going to suggest you do it is that you should go through the entire textbook and write down every single definition and every single piece for the glossary, like as homework. And that is going to be your homework for this week, one part of your homework for this week. The reason why I want you to do it so early is because it helps so much for you to know, like right off the top of your head, what each word means. And obviously, I will let you know a little bit further down the line which words will 100% be on the exam, because obviously I've like had a lot of people I know do it and they tell me the exact same things. So some of them are more important than others, but it's very, very good practice for you to just write all of them down, write all the examples down, and just have them memorized. So on your own time, as you can see on the slideshow, you should and you will be required actually to write the definition for the words in the glossary that have an asterisk, okay, at the back of the book, or you can do it on a Google document if you are keen on typing. So you'll just basically have to go through the entire book You'll see the building a musical vocabulary. You'll write the examples down. You'll see which piece they are related to and things like that. If you're not too sure, next class, we'll do a quick review of them because you will have all of them filled out by next class. And we can just go through them. If you're missing any, obviously it's fine, but we might do a quiz on them like right off the bat. Okay, awesome. So let's focus a little bit more on the Middle Ages more specifically. So you can read what's in the textbook on your own time, but what I did is I took all the information you see in these large chunky paragraphs and I basically condensed them into a few key points. I want to outline that this is not the most detailed explanation. I'm not telling you every single very important and like niche detail about the Middle Ages. I'm telling you the big grand ideas that are more important to your success than knowing the little nitty-gritty stuff. Okay, so the Middle Ages, obviously this was very, very long time ago. First thing, it was framed by the fall of the Roman Emperor and Constantinople. Okay, and there are 3 specific periods. You won't be quizzed on these, it's just good to know. There's the early Christian, Romanesque, and Gothic. It was also known as the Dark Ages, I think because of the fact that obviously they didn't have very advanced medical discoveries. People were dying of plagues left and right. It was quite an interesting time. But I really want you guys, this is where you should take note. The most important thing about the Middle Ages is the Roman Catholic Church. I cannot emphasize how much of the exam will be about the Roman Catholic Church. Your essay will most likely be about the Roman Catholic Church, okay? Because they are so incredibly important. Basically, what they did was they made sacred music very popular. And if you look at the bottom of the slide here, where it says very important in blue, you'll notice that there's the words sacred and then secular. For those of you who don't know, sacred means related to religion. So it's about God, Jesus, the Bible, things like that, right? So it's like when you go to church and you hear a song about Jesus or about God, the Bible, that's sacred music. And secular music is like the songs we listen to now. They're just about like love, about pop, or no, not about pop. They're about love, they're about nature, they're about I don't know, feeling sad, things like that, right? But they're not at all related to any religion or any religious connotations, anything like that, okay? And actually, when I did my level 10 history, my comparative essay was about sacred and secular music. So it's very, very good to remember those 2 words when you're doing the exam. Okay, awesome. So last thing, we'll get more into this later because one of the parts will be about Mass, but the Mass was super important with the Roman Catholic Church because it was the most important service. During big celebrations, religious celebrations like Easter, Christmas, things like that, they had Mass. So obviously it became very important. And its importance is outlined through the fact that in the current day and age, we still have Mass in church, right? So think about it. It went from like the year 476 to 2020, we still have Mass. So obviously Roman Catholic Church, incredibly important, incredibly powerful in the Middle Ages, but we'll also get into the fall of the Roman Emperor, Roman Catholic Church, which will be interesting later. Okay, and here, if you go on page 7 of your textbook, you see the building a musical vocabulary. This you'll do on your own time, obviously. I will not get into the individual details because things like monophonic texture, polyphonic texture, I expect you guys to know those. If you don't, really quickly, monophonic means like 1 line, polyphonic means like 2 or more independent lines. Okay, but do those on your own time. Okay, so here, a lot of words here, right? But I'll just tell you guys the most important things to remember. So these are about the elements of like the musical style in the Middle Ages. So we start with texture, right? Because in the beginning, music was very 2-dimensional. Like right now we hear music and they have like a bunch of layers. We have like layers of instruments, layers of voices. We have like choirs and songs. But back in the day, it was single line texture. So it was monophonic textures, right? And over time, we'll talk about the fact that it evolved to polyphony, more like 2 voices, 3 voices. But at the beginning, it was just one single voice, one single texture singing. And that's the way the Roman Catholic Church liked it. So that's the way that it was written. Notation. So basically, we'll get into this later, but if you did not write sacred music, the chances of your pieces being written down and kept as as a historical item were very, very slim, because the Roman Catholic Church did not like secular music. If it wasn't about church, if it wasn't about religion, Jesus, the Bible, the Roman Catholic Church didn't even bother with it. We'll get more into that later. That's actually very interesting. Okay, melodic range. Here I highlighted the most important part, because medieval music has very narrow range. They didn't have huge perfect eighth jumps, octave jumps, perfect 12 jumps. No, no, no. They moved by really, if you were very a good composer, they'd let you do it by 2 jumps or something like that, but otherwise very narrow range, right? Okay, perfect. And then rhythm, this honestly isn't important because every song has a different rhythm, but you can read that in the textbook on the slides if you want. And the final thing is about musical genres. It was super focused on church service, sacred genres, right? Or it celebrated the experience of lives such as Jesus on Easter, if you guys know about that, through song and dance. We'll also talk a little bit more about secular music and secular genres later. Okay, perfect. Any questions so far?
I'm gonna ask for these things, do we need to take these notes down as well? Because
You can take notes in yeah, sure, you can take some notes, but honestly this will be in your textbook. And to be honest, they don't really quiz you on the elements of music in Middle Ages, but it's good to just whatever I highlighted, you can just write down, because that would be important. But that doesn't include a lot of stuff, right? Okay,
okay.
cool.
Can you
Good
just give me
question.
a second? Because I'm not already.
Oh, am I going too fast? Are you guys good?
Oh, yeah.
I just don't have time to press them all down.
Oh, okay, wait, don't worry. You will have this slideshow in the Google Classroom, so you can look at it for hours on end if you want to. You can read the entire thing if you want to, but I'm basically just going off of what I'm saying, okay? So don't worry, you will have this slideshow if you want to make new notes and stuff like that. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Okay, let's get into more important stuff. Let's go to the first unit. This is on page 9 of your textbook. I hope you're following around. But you can read that big chunk of text at the beginning if you want, but they never quiz you on things like that. But anyways, so the Gregorian chant. When the Roman Catholic Church came into power, they evolved a song from the Hebrew chant tradition, sorry. Hebrew chant is a kind of sacred music, and it served as functional music in the worship in masses of the Roman Catholic Church. I want to talk about Pope Gregory too, because as I said before, if your song wasn't sacred in the medieval ages, then your chances of it being written down, being remembered, were very slim, right? So what Pope Gregory did, you can see here on the side, individual events and publications. Here you can see when he lived and when he died. Basically, what he did is he was in the Roman Catholic Church, and he was the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. And he thought, well, I want to keep sacred music. I want to have people listen, read, and play sacred music forever. So I'm going to write it down. And basically that's what he did. He wrote down and organized a bunch of sacred songs, the Gregorian chant that we're going to learn being one of them. And he basically oversaw expansion of schools to train singers in sacred repertoire. So if you wanted to be a singer, you'd go to the Roman Catholic Church. If you wanted to be a priest, you'd go to the Roman Catholic Church. And Pope Gregory would basically organize everything, organize the music, and things like that. Okay. So the features, this is very interesting because the Gregorian chant, as I've said before, it started with a monophonic texture. I'm actually going to play for you the Gregorian chant, but it is incredibly like one voiced. You will only hear one person's voice singing, and it has some model textures. I think it's like Dorian, inspired by Dorian mode. I could be wrong. We'll get into that later. But it moves by step and narrow leaps. And obviously it's based on sacred Latin texts. If you want to read the rest, you can, but those are the most important points about the Gregorian chants. Let's move on. Okay. This is on page 10, right below the building of musical vocabulary. This is the first piece we will listen to. It's called Heck Dies, I think. I'm not sure about the pronunciation, but you will recognize these two words because they're like very apparent in the Middle Ages. So this is the chant version. It's very important that you write down like Heck Dies and then chant, because later on we'll learn like Heck Dies, Organum, and different things like that. And they have the same name except for their like different styles. So this is the chant, and it's anonymous. So obviously that's important to know, but very mysterious for us. Okay, so let's talk about the background information. I put that it's very important, but obviously you guys know, if you've done the exam before, how important the background information of a piece is. So the genre is Gregorian chant, obviously. The composer is anonymous. Composition date, okay, we don't know exactly when it was composed, but early Middle Ages, will be good enough. Okay, and then mass component. We will learn about the mass later and like write this down, but it was part of the gradual from the mass for Easter Day. So I'll show you guys like a little chart later on where the gradual fit in. The source of text, it's from the Bible, the Old Testament. It's Psalms 118. And then, yeah, you just need to remember that it's Old Testament and then that that subsection of the Old Testament. It's in Latin. It has soloist, and then in the later versions, it had a chorus, right? But at the beginning, just a soloist, and it's monophonic, as we know. Okay, awesome. So, by the way, for the homework, I have a quiz for you guys, and it's basically a quiz of the entire first unit on the Middle Ages, and there's a lot of like quiz questions on the background information. So make sure you take note of that. So in the textbook, they show you the sheet music for the piece. We don't need to do that because I'm pretty sure you guys are all doing it online, meaning you do it through a portal and you'll be listening to it. So that being said, okay, let me see. Wait, I'm gonna play something and then you guys tell me if you can hear it? Could you guys hear that? Yes? No?
No.
No? Cool. Okay, I have to do it this way. You're gonna listen to this for for a few seconds and then we will talk about it. Okay, I'm gonna stop it there. Let me plug my headphones in. Okay, cool. So in case you were wondering, you'll know more about this once you fill out all the musical vocabulary, but when they first started writing music, when Pope Gregory was like, hey, I want to start notating music, they used neumes. It's called neumes. So they weren't notes like we have today. They were little signs here. You can see it on page 11 of your textbook too. Also, if you not if you want, it's a requirement for you to listen to all of these songs and know them by heart. I know it can be a little bit tedious, and this isn't like the most exciting song in the world, but you will have to know them for the exam. And if you want to look at the sheet music, it's page 11 to follow, but there's no real use in that. So based on that, obviously you can see by the sheet music, you can hear it. Obviously this one has, I think, a chorus with it, which was interesting, but it's a monophonic texture, okay? There's no two lines. It's really one person singing one line, and that's basically it. Monophonic, very important to remember. Okay, and the melody is based on Dorian mode. If you don't know what the modes are, research them because they are very important in the Middle Ages. If you don't know what the Dorian mode is, feel free to research that on your own time, just so you know what it is. It won't help you on the exam, but it's just good information to know. So it's a responsorial performance. If you don't know what that word means, I don't blame you, but I put the Google definition there. It means recited in parts with a response between each part. So if you flip to page 11, you can see the solo voice is saying heck, and then like dies or something like that. And then the other chorus is singing the second part or the second part of the lyrics, right? And it's basically like an exchange between them. So it's important for you to know, just know like the first 2 or 3 words that the solo versus the chorus voice is saying. It's on the slideshow here. You can look at the sheet music, things like that. Last thing, it's unmeasured rhythm. Obviously, if you look at the sheet music, you're like, okay, what's the time signature? What are the key signatures? They didn't have that. So it's unmeasured rhythm. You kind of just sing it and vibe with it however you feel like it should sound. Okay, so melismatic text setting. This will come to you when you do your definitions, but it means that there's many notes for a single syllable of text, right? So if you look at page 11, the beginning of the sheet music for Heck Dies, the modern transcription, you see that on the word heck, I think it's heck, I have no idea, but it goes through so many different notes before it gets to D, right? In modern singing, we have like one note, one word, but here it's melismatic text setting where one word was worth like a bunch of different notes, okay? So if you look at the sheet music, basically what they're telling us here is that on the EA, which is line 3 of the sheet music on page 11, at the bottom of page 11, that is the longest demonstration of the melismatic text setting. As you can see, it goes through like a bunch of different notes for like a single word or single syllable. Okay. So the other words, you can look at those later. They're not the most important things in the world, but this conveys the joyful message of the feast of Esti. And I know it doesn't sound joyful, but that's what they thought sounded joyful in the time. Okay, perfect. So that being said, do we want to do this? Yes, we will do this. Okay, so right now, based on what we learned a lot. I just told you a lot of information, but I want to make sure you guys like actually know what we're talking about and you're not just like totally lost and are really sad. So what we're going to do is we're first going to talk about the Gregorian chant. I'm going to ask one person to give me one piece of information about the Gregorian chant, whether it's the background and origins, characteristic features, you want to talk a little bit about, tell me what Pope Gregory did, just tell me something, okay? Cool. So let's start with the first person on my screen is Belle. So Belle, give me a piece of information about the Gregorian chant that you learned just now.
Oh, no, unmeasured rhythm.
Good, perfect. Next is I see Emily. Emily, tell me something, anything.
The person who wrote it is anonymous, and it's like one line, so it's monophonic.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. I can't spell, but next, let's have, perfect. Who's next? I have Jessie. Jessie, give me something.
It's invented by Pope Gregory, and its other name is called penchant, I believe.
Yes, good. So just to correct you there, it wasn't invented by Pope Gregory because the Gregorian chant, we don't know who invented it. Pope Gregory was the one who organized the music in the Roman Catholic Church, which included the Gregorian chant. So make sure if you're ever writing an essay, don't mention that he invented it because he didn't. Make sure you mention that he organized the music. Okay, got it? Cool. I'm going to assume that's a yes. Okay, Coco, what's up? Give me something. Tell me something you learned just now.
The melody is based on Dorian mode.
Ah, very good. Okay. And last but not least, we have still learning your names, Kathleen. So Kathleen, tell me anything.
It was composed in the early Middle Ages.
Good. Okay, you know what? I'm not even going to write it, but yeah, awesome, everyone. Okay. So those are obviously, I hope you learned more than just those things, but those were very key points about Gregorian chant, about hecdies, which are very good to know. Cool. Let's move on. So the second, we've already done the first unit, which is kind of amazing. Does anyone have any questions before we continue? None? Cool. So let's start learning a little bit more about the second unit, which is organum. So after many, many years, you can assume, like as humans, we started to experiment with the music that we were given, right? We saw the Gregorian chant, we were like, how can we make it better? How can we make it sound more pleasing to the ear? So they started harmonizing, and this led to polyphony. Okay, so it wasn't just one single line in like a piece, it was multiple different lines harmonizing with each other, creating like a more grandiose kind of music. So the earliest forms of polyphony that we know are called organum, and you will study two different kinds of organum. The one in the Middle Ages was the very, very beginning, the earliest form of polyphony. So it began as like improvised practice, but it evolved over centuries. We'll learn about the evolved version in later classes. So the first notated example is found in the ninth century. That's crazy. 9th century, called Musica. And I can't say that word, but that is a very, very important thing to learn. I just call it Musica because that's the easiest way to say it. We'll go through that a little bit later, but that's very important. I recommend you write it down and you really look at the definition for it. Okay, let's talk about the features of organum. So this is where I really recommend after class you go back to this slide because this is the introduction of something called cantus firmus. Cantus firmus, I can't even begin to tell you how important it is in the Middle Ages. In the other units, or rather other parts of the class we will learn, it isn't as important in the other eras, but in the Middle Ages, it's incredibly important. So the cantus firmus, you can see it in the definitions, but I'll just tell you what it is. It means fixed song, okay? So it's the borrowed material from the Gregorian chant, and it serves as the structural framework for the polyphonic compositions, okay? So how can I explain this a little bit more simple? So basically, it's the thing that will likely not change and is like the base for the house that is the rest of the piece. So it's fixed song, structural framework. Those are the key words. Okay, and organum, this is where it becomes interesting because parallel lines were now added to create emphasis, to create chant melodies that emphasize the perfects. Okay, so the perfect 4, perfect 5th, perfect 6th, and then like octaves, things like that. Okay, so parallel organum, very parallel lines to emphasize parallel 4th, 5th, and 8th. Last thing I'm going to mention really quickly is that this is when they started saying, hey, very narrow ranges of dynamics, of lines, things like that, they're just so boring. So they started including a wider variety of intervals, rhythms. They started thinking outside the box of what the Gregorian chant told them to do. So this is where the words some new experimentation, some new kinds of pieces, but it was still largely sacred music. Okay, let's move on. So some of these aren't too important. Actually, all of them are super important. What am I saying? Well, I'll just go into the very, very broad things you need to know about each. Musica, the first one on the slide. This was a 9th century treatise, right? And it contained the earliest examples of polyphony in Western music. So Western music is anything that is like encapsulated in the like Western side of the country. So that included like the Roman Catholic Church back in the day. So it was a book for theorists. This is what they think. They think it was for theorists and not for performances, sorry. So basically they thought it was just as a way to preserve the pieces rather than use it for like a sheet music like you would for any other book that you now can buy. So this is very interesting. This is the first examples of notated polyphony. So they saw that and they're like, that's pretty interesting. And second thing I want to mention is the Notre Dame school. Many artists worked with this school. They basically worked here. They composed songs here because they all had like a common vision. They all were very focused on sacred music, and they all wanted to form a compositional school where they could all be together, write together, and like have the same kind of music together. And this is where we are introduced to Mr. Léonin and then Perrotin. Okay, these two are super important. They were the leading composers of the Notre Dame school. Léonin, slightly more important than Perrotin, no offense to him, but he was the first composer of polyphony known to us by name. I want to note here that he is not the composer of the piece we will learn for Organum, but he is the first composer of polyphony, like generally. He was active in Paris, so he was largely in France, and he produced 2-part organums. He used original and discant style. You will learn discant style once you do the musical vocabulary, so that's just the importance of doing that. Next is Mr. Perrotin. Perrotin, I like to think of it as like the guy who worked with Léonin and then like piggybacked off of his work, because he saw what Léonin was doing with polyphony and he's like, cool, how about I add like way more parts to the songs than Léonin can do. So he started writing 3- and 4-part polyphony, started really expanding polyphonic technique. And yeah, he also replaced sections with organa that was originally composed by Léonin. But they were friends, I guess. Yeah, the two praised each other a lot, things like that. Okay, awesome. Let's move along. So this is the piece we will learn about organum, okay? So this is obviously a polyphonic piece, and it was written in the style of Léonin, but he was not the composer. This is an anonymous piece. We do not know who composed it, but it was written in his style. The Gregorian chant, Heck Dies, obviously you listened to it before. You will know, you will remember it much more once you start listening to it like on repeat, but it served as the starting point for this piece. So if you remember here, it served as the structural framework, which means that that was the cantus firmus. The Gregorian chant we just learned was the cantus firmus for this organum. Okay, and you'll probably hear it, maybe not, maybe you will. So general background information. I don't know why there's a huge space there, but the genre is organum. Obviously, it's Notre Dame style. So there are different genres of organum and styles of organum, but the first one we learned in the Middle Ages is Notre Dame style. It's anonymous, but in the style of Léonin, but it's still anonymous. We know the composition date. We know the composition date. The source of text was the Old Testament, the same as the Gregorian chant, okay? But just less specific. It's in Latin. They have 2 voices, soloist and chorus, polyphonic texture with some monophonic passages. So that means that in some places it was just the soloist or just the chorus, and there weren't like one of the voices quietened down before coming back again. Okay, awesome. So here I'm going to ask, this is key to your success, but okay, my computer's glitching. That's nice. Does anyone have any questions, any comments, anything that they need clarification on? Write it in the chat, unmute. Don't worry, this is like the first class. I'm telling you guys a lot. So I expect you guys to have some questions, some concerns.
So like how did the songs like keep going passing down in history if it was like if they had no idea who wrote it?
Okay, that's very interesting because back in the day when Mr. Pope Gregory, if you recall, Pope Gregory was the one who was organizing, notating the music. The thing is, some of the music they had, like they had no idea how to identify it, right? Or it was that number one, they just didn't write who the composer was because they didn't think it was important enough, right? Because back in the day, your name didn't mean as much. You were part of the Roman Catholic Church, and that was an honor in and of itself. So it was like, why do you want even more to be recognized by the song you wrote when you're already recognized within the Roman Catholic Church? Or number two, they just simply like got the music. Pope Gregory found the music. Someone told him it was a music, but they just didn't know who wrote it, right? So it was very hard for them to kind of organize who wrote each piece because they had to do everything by hand, and at that time it was very inefficient. Someone was bound to forget something, someone was bound to like not want to say their name, things like that. Okay, cool, very good question. I hope I answered it. Any others? Just say yes or no in the chat, anything, so I can
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, this new version of whatever you call it is like kind of like evolved through the one before, basically.
Yes.
Whoever this person is in style of Leo or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Yeah, that's actually a awesome observation. So yes, it evolved. Obviously, they have the exact same name, but it evolved from the chant to the organum piece, and it's in the style of Leonine. Okay, good. Okay, you guys have awesome questions. I'm actually very happy. So you can see the sheet music here. Obviously, you can look at it, play it on whatever instrument you play later if you really want to. But for now, I will tell you, we will listen to the organum piece, okay? So this one sounds, in my opinion, a little bit better just because it has more voices, but I don't know how to share my sound, so we have to do it this way. Okay, I'm just gonna pause it there. You should listen to the whole. Yeah, you should definitely listen to the whole thing. But I really like this recording because they tell you specifically what is going on. So what you just heard was the organal style for the hectads. Next, you'll hear the original chant. So what we heard with the Gregorian chant, that's likely what you will hear. And then still organal, discant, which you'll learn later, and then again back to organal. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys, this is on page 17 of your textbook, who can tell me, just like really briefly, which voice contains the cantus firmus in this piece? It's right in the textbook, so just tell me.
The lower one.
Yes, good. Okay, so there's two voices, the lower one does. Really obvious, it's right in the textbook, but we call it the tenor, okay? Okay, perfect. Let me get there. Oh, it's also highlighted on the slides, which is cool. Okay, so the upper voice, as you can tell, the lower voice, and if you were paying attention for the Gregorian chant, it was very much just like one note length, right? It was all like dotted quarter notes. But now you see the upper voice, it has a bunch of different notes. It has quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, right? And it's a little bit more diverse in the, it's more rhythmically active. I like what they said there, than the cantus firmus, which is the lower line. So they go from organal style to discant style to monophonic sections. Obviously, that's what this little YouTube this YouTube visual of the song is trying to tell you. But it starts with the organal style. If you were paying attention, you would know the organal style. It's like free organum. The voices are parallel. There's polyphonic voices, and they're like singing together. And the cantus firmus is in the lower voice. And then it moves on to the monophonic texture. So we didn't get there yet. Let's see if I can. Okay, it's here. Like if you listen to this on your own, you can hear it. But then it goes to the monophonic texture where it's just like the Gregorian chant, one voice only, the other one's totally silent, and it just moves on like that for a while. Then it goes back to the organal style, which is what you can see on the YouTube thing here. So right about here, it's back to the organal style, and then it goes to a discant style. And I know you guys haven't done the definitions yet, but I'll just talk briefly about the discant style. It's basically a style where there's more rhythmic movement in the cantus firmus. So they slightly alter the cantus firmus, and remember the cantus firmus is the lowest voice. So what you see, the second line there, they slightly alter it to have for it to be a little bit more rhythmically active. So instead of it just being a dotted quarter note, they have a little bit more like diversity in their rhythms. Okay, perfect. And then obviously there's perfect fourths, perfect fifths, perfect eighths, and octaves. This is the most obvious in this song. I think that is all that is extremely important that I can tell you. Yeah, you don't need to know this clause soleil. It's not even tested on the exam, but if you want to put that in your notes, that would be good for you. Okay, awesome. So we're done organum. And based on what we've learned, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay, don't be like afraid to ask questions, because I obviously have zero idea if you understand any of this or not. I have no idea if you're even like paying attention, but if you have questions, I am free to answer them.
Okay, can you just ask again, do we need to have like everything on our like doc and stuff?
Yes, but what you can do is you can just copy paste this information you see on the slides onto a document once you get access to the slides, right? From the Google Classroom.
Oh no, already have all this stuff. Okay, good. That's a good idea. Actually, I didn't even notice.
Yeah. Also on the Google Classroom, I shared with you guys a document, which is essentially like the textbook. It's essentially like what you see on the slide, except a little bit more detailed. So if you want to like make a copy of that and keep that for yourself, you're free to do that, because during the exam, you should memorize this stuff, but some of it, obviously there's like 200 pages in this book and you can't memorize everything. So that would be nice. I'll go through that later if we have time at the end of class. Okay, cool. Next. We'll skip that because I'm pretty sure you guys know. Okay, third unit, the motet. This is still sacred. The first 3 units we learned were sacred. Just right off the bat, I'll tell you guys that. Okay, this is the third Hecdies song and also the last one. So yay for that, because it's quite an interesting and it's an interesting song. Anyways, so Hecdies in Organum, obviously like we saw, it contains extended melismatic passages in the upper voice. So if you look back to page 17 and you look at the very top sheet music there, you see there's a lot more diversity in the rhythm of the notes, right? But the text was like difficult and awkward to perform, which was like their excuse for creating a different like genre and calling it the motet. So basically what they did is they added new texts to the previously texted upper voices. If you recall, if you go back to page 17 and you look at the top, they don't sing anything. They don't sing any songs. They're just singing the notes. And the cantus firmus at the bottom, the lower voice, is singing all the lyrics. So they're singing the do, the mi, and the no. But the top is just pure harmonization, I guess you can call it, if you can even call it that. So what they did was they said that is not good. So we will add text to both of the voices so that it sounds interesting and it sounds like not awkward, and I'm not just like singing random notes and hoping for the best. Okay, cool. So the one we will learn is sacred, but they did start to dabble in secular content. So recall that secular means not related to religion or Bible at all. But we will be talking about a sacred motet. So background and origins, developed in the 13th century. Okay, this is obvious. This is really easy to just jot down. I'm not sure if they'll quiz you on this on the exam, but it might be like worth 1 point on the exam. So just write it down. It was important in the development of polyphony, obviously, because now you're having multiple voices saying multiple pieces of text instead of one voice singing text and one voice just like harmonizing and singing random notes. Well, not random, but like notes without text. And like I said, new texts were added to the upper voices, and it was sacred and secular. So if on the exam you ever get a question that's like, talk about the development of or contrast of sacred and secular music in the Middle Ages, it would be kind of cool to mention that the motet was kind of like the turning point where sacred and secular music were both like appropriate with this genre. Whereas in like the Gregorian chant in Organum, it was purely sacred. And now they're starting like, hey, why don't we add some secular content to the music? Okay, characteristic features, usually 3 voices. The song we will learn, there is 3 voices. Bottom voice, as always, is the cantus firmus. If you're ever stuck, you're like, oh, what's the cantus firmus? Just think bottom voice, original text. That's all you have to know. Like organum, perfect 4th, 5th, 8th octaves, things like that were very, very featured in the piece. And they're more rhythmically active. So it went from like the Gregorian chant being only one kind of note, dotted quarter, to the organum having 2 notes where one of them was very stable and one of them had a little bit of like diversity in the rhythms. And now you're going to see the piece where it's just interesting and everyone has something different to sing. Everyone has different notes and note values. I say everyone, but I mean like the different voices, the 3 voices. Okay, cool. So if you're following me, which I hope you are in the textbook, we're on page 18, the motet, and we're going to the required listening. That is a nice color. Okay, so this is a sacred motet, as I've said before, and Heck Dies obviously serves as the cantus firmus again, okay? And the song is called O Mitissima Virgo Heck Dies, and it's very interesting because if you don't remember like which voice sings which one, O Mitissima is the highest, Virgo is like the middle voice, and then Heck Dies is the lower. So it goes like from highest to lowest, from left to right. Okay, but that's just like something you should know. You won't be tested on that. Okay, awesome. Background information. So genre, polytextual motet from the Bamberg Codex. This was just like a manuscript where they like found the manuscript and they're like, oh, there's treaties on music here and there's a lot of polyphonic music in here, so we'll just credit that book for having had this piece. Okay, good. Composer, again, anonymous. We just don't know who it is. Composition date, 13th century. Sources of text. Obviously, here's where it's a little bit more evident that it's sacred because it's about the praise of Virgin Mary and Heck Dies. Virgin Mary is Jesus's mother, or the one who gave birth to him. Language, Latin, honestly, you probably don't need to know the language, but like write it down just for fun because the three first pieces, were in Latin. There's three voices and it's polyphonic texture. Okay, if you move on to page 19, you will do the vocabulary on your own time. You don't need to know the pieces, not the pieces. You don't need to know the lyrics unless you want to sing them on your own, which would be your own choice, and I'm not one to interfere with that. Okay, so look at the sheet music, page 20 in the textbook. This is where you'll clearly see what I'm talking about. And this is where I should explain some more things. So you see there's clearly three voices. And if you look at like the first words they're saying, the first line is the top voice is saying O mitissima, second one is saying Virgo, and the third is saying heck dies, okay? So the top voice, like nowadays, we call it like soprano, alto, tenor, bass. But back in the day, there were only three voices. So they said the top voice was the triplum. Okay, I wrote it down here. The middle voice was, we call it the duplum. Well, the book calls it the duplum. They don't really use motetas because they just don't. So top voice, triplum, middle voice, duplum, and the bottom voice, tenor and cantus firmus. Okay, always cantus firmus is the bottom. It's always the tenor. Okay, they repeat so much here, but obviously polyphonic texture, it's polytextual. That means there's more than one text. So there's three different texts. If you're interested in knowing very briefly, Omitissima, as said by the book, it's about like Mary asking her son, Jesus, like I said, to help in resisting evil temptations. So she's like, oh, Jesus, resist the evil temptation. And then the middle voice is praising Mary for her purity and virginity. Yes, it's a little bit strange, but that's what they wrote about. The Bible said that. And then the bottom voice, the tenor cantus firmus, is praising God or praise to God for his eternal mercy. You will not need to know this, but it's just interesting to know what they were writing about. But yeah, so top voice, triplum, middle voice, duplum, bottom voice, tenor, or you can call it the cantus firmus. Okay, cool. So everyone should be on page 20, like I said, and we can continue learning a little bit more about what it is. So the cantus firmus part, the last part, features a rhythmic pattern of long, long, short, long. Okay, this is what we call ostinato. Before I move on, I am going to play the piece for you guys, and you can follow with the sheet music. This is the only accurate sheet music that doesn't skip around, so you'll be able to see exactly what the sheet music is and what the sound that corresponds with it sounds like. It's super ineffective. Okay, I'm gonna pause it there. It's actually interesting. If you focus your attention and you want to hear like different lyrics, so if you focus like, oh, I want to hear O mitissima when they're singing versus, oh, I want to hear Virgo, you actually start hearing that despite it being three voices, which was interesting. Okay, cool. Let's continue learning a little bit more about like what makes it a motet. So the next thing is that the triplum and the duplum, remember triplum top voice, duplum middle voice, they overlap a lot. So now when we learn about like writing our own pieces and compositions, if we have like overlapping notes from different like if our alto overlaps with soprano or things like that is bad. We don't want that when we write currently in the status quo. But back in the day, if you had overlapping notes or things like that, it was totally fine. And they didn't really care that much, which unfortunately is not how it is today. So they both share the same rhythmic activity and created the effect of like a triple meter. So here there's no direct like meter on the sign on the sheet music. It doesn't tell us it's 3/4, but intuitively, if you look at the notes, you see, okay, these make 3 beats, probably it's triple meter. Okay. Harmonic intervals again, perfect 4, 5, 8. That it should be stuck in your brain from like the past 3 songs we learned. And the predominant text setting of the upper voice is syllabic and pneumatic. Okay, so if you recall neumes, those are the little things that they use to write the pieces with, and the tenor is melismatic. So once you start like filling out the definitions, you'll like look back at this slideshow and you'll be like, oh, that makes like 100 times more sense than what it like sounds like to me now. But until then, I don't want to tell you guys the definition because I want you guys to learn it and memorize it on your own. Okay, awesome. Also, if you look at page 21, there's like reflections. If you want to do those, that would be cool. But they hold no value to the exam. So it would just be like a cool activity to do on the side. All right, any questions? I know, we're going through so much. This is a lot. Oh no. Wait, let me stop sharing. I'm gonna reshare my screen. Okay. If there's no questions, I'm going to continue. So if you have a question, ask it now, or, it'll be kind of difficult for you in the future. No questions? Cool. Oh, don't start playing, please. We'll skip those. Okay, actually, I want to do this. So basically, one question that one of my friends had when they did the level 10 history exam was analyze the contributions of anonymous composers in the Middle Ages. I thought that was such an interesting question, right? Because like Emily asked me a few minutes ago, like, why were they anonymous, right? And like we just didn't know why they were anonymous, and isn't it like intuitive that their name would be associated to their piece, but it like wasn't back in the day because this was like so many years ago. So I don't want you to answer this because maybe you're not ready, I don't know, maybe you just don't feel like answering it, but don't be surprised if one day I'm like, oh, you're going to write an essay analyzing the contributions of anonymous composers, and then you will be prepared and you will think about it. So just intuitively in your head, think about, so what did the anonymous composers even write, and what did they contribute, and like why were they anonymous? Just think about those for fun. Okay, but that's a very interesting question that I liked. Okay, this is getting into, basically we were focused on sacred music before, but at one point people like who are not living by the rules of like the Roman Catholic Church, just like regular people, because if you worked with the church, you were like very, people looked up to you. They thought like you were basically more important in society than the regular people who worked usually day jobs such as like farming, welding, things like that, very tactile jobs. Basically what started to happen is that the regular people, I say regular very loosely, like just as the people who weren't part of the Roman Catholic Church and who didn't fully like love always listening to sacred music, they were like, hey, why don't we write our own songs? Like, why are we always listening to the Roman Catholic Church's songs? Why do we always have to listen to sacred songs? And this is where the chanson was developed. Chanson means song. It's directly translated from French. Okay, so they started saying like, oh, let's start making secular music that's about like I don't know, love, that's about nature, things like that. And they also used instruments. So with sacred music, the Roman Catholic Church, this is important, but the Roman Catholic Church, they did not like instruments. Unless you played the organ, which is like the glorified piano you see like in churches. Unless you played that, like they didn't want any instruments near their music. They were like, absolutely not. But obviously now we have instruments and it makes everything a little bit more lively. And the people in the Middle Ages who weren't part of the church were like, let's just make lively music about things that we love, things that we care about, that isn't like sacred, that isn't always about um, the Bible or things like that. Okay. And the other thing that's important to note is that because it wasn't sacred music, like I said before, Pope Gregory had zero incentive to like write down the secular music. So basically the only reason why we have it is because maybe like the odd person from the church or the odd person who was not part of the church but who had an education in like basic writing was able to transcribe the songs, or it was passed down through generations long enough for someone to be able to write it and for us to now be able to explore it. So it was mostly passed down through oral tradition. So like they sang it to their children sang it to their children, and obviously that's not the most efficient way of passing down songs, but it was the only option they had because the church disliked secular music. Okay, let's talk about background and origins. I think I already touched on most of this, but what's important to note is that there are two people that were important. There were the trouvères and the troubadours. Okay, here, if you look on page 22, I'm on page 22 of the textbook. If you look on page 23, you can see the trouvère was there. They were important. They were the one who originally performed, composed poems and songs, right? So they're the ones who wrote it down, um, and things like that. The only difference between the trouvères and the troubadours was that the trouvères lived and worked in northern France. This is important. So trouvère, northern France, troubadour, southern France, but we don't even talk about the troubadours. It's just nice to know, but we're focusing on the trouvères who are in the north of France. Okay. And then they recorded their things in their songs in songbooks called the chansonniers. Okay, this is just important to know. Generally, you can jot it down if you want. Not like I don't think they're even going to quiz you on that on the exam. Okay, characteristic features of the chanson. So monophonic texture, number one. When you hear it, you'll see like, ah, yes, it is monophonic because there's only one person singing. But in like in the current world of music we live in now, obviously they took the piece and they said that's not interesting for it to just be like monophonic and just have a voice, so they added instruments with it. Okay, so you will hear this is the first song finally out of like the 3 units before where there is musical accompaniment, and you will hear it. It will be very interesting. And it most notably, they were about love. They were about chivalry, like asking your wife or something, asking someone to be your wife, love, general things like that. Obviously you can think about that more if you want to, but that's what made them happy in the past. Okay, so the song associated with the chanson, if you go on page 22 at the bottom to the required listening, is a song called Ce fut un mai by Monio Darras. So finally, a song that isn't anonymous. Make sure you write this guy's name down because they will quiz you on him most likely. So, Ce fut un mai, this means it happened in May. And I actually like read the the lyrics and it's a little bit sad. It's like about someone like losing their loved one because or like being heartbroken and then seeing someone being in love and they're like, oh wow, thanks for rubbing it in. But anyways, it's called Ce fut un mai. It's a trouvère song. Okay, so remember, trouvère worked and lived in northern France. It is a trouvère song. This is a trouvère song. So genre, monophonic chanson. Like, okay, for the background information, you should have everything written down because they're going to test you on the background information, and it's just nice to like be able to look at a document and be like, oh, that's the answer to it. Okay. So most of this is pretty straightforward. It's monophonic. You can see the composer is Monio Darras. Interesting name. Composition date, mid 13th century. So back last unit, when we were learning about the motet, it was 13th century, but now it's mid 13th century. So we've moved along a little bit into history. So it was a secular poem made into a song. It's an old French. That should be pretty obvious by the name. And it's a solo singer, but the recording we will listen to has some accompaniment as said in the texture. Okay, cool. So next slide, I will show you the piece. It's kind of interesting. It's a pretty lively piece for once. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. If you want to do, okay, so this is the only reflection on page 25 that I think is like worth your time. If you want to do it, you can. This isn't part of the homework, but if you want to listen to this and think what instruments they're using, that would be cool. And that would be interesting for you to do as like personal research. Okay. Okay. Yes, we will stop it there. So obviously, that's an interesting song. You have to listen to it more on your own, but yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So for the reflection, what does the style of accompaniment mean?
Okay, good question. So it means like, is it just a sustained accompaniment? So it's just like one note for like the whole song, or is it like what kind of like texture does it have? Is it playing multiple notes? Is it monophonic where it's just one line? Is there multiple instruments? Is it like and you can even just go really basic, like it makes like it sounds lively compared to the song. It's like bringing down the song, things like that. Just really basic things about what you hear with the accompaniment, which in this case is like yours to figure out. Okay.
Okay, and what about like interludes? What's that?
Okay, it didn't happen in this song, but if for like some reason there was like a lute playing or like an instrument playing before the guy started singing, then that would be an introduction or an interlude. Or if there was like halfway through the song, the guy just stopped singing and it was just the instrument playing, then that would be an interlude. And the other example would be an introduction. But in this recording, it had none of those. So that's not important. But just for future reference, introduction is when the music or an instrument is playing before this person starts singing, and interlude is like this person stops singing and it's just the instrument for a very short period of time or long period of time. Okay, cool. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Very good question. Okay, so now let's learn more a bit about like what the textbook basically tells us about it. So it's secular, it's sung in Old French. It's very Old French. Obviously, if you know French, you probably would not fully understand it. So the internal structure, some of this isn't important because it's more related to the sheet music than to the actual songs, and we're learning about the actual songs. But it's important to know the internal structure is AABB with open and closed endings. Okay. The first ending of part A is open, and then generally the rhythm scheme, I think, sorry, is AAB, and then CCB. So the B part is consistent throughout the entire song. And here's where it was like people were like, oh, let's not only have perfect 4, 5, 8. Let's have a ninth, a melodic range of like a ninth. Okay. You don't really have to know about like the lilting and jolly, like that's just RCM being extra that way. Okay, good. So important things, its strophic form has 5 verses, okay, 12, just strophic form in general, you should know that. The internal structure is AAB, but the rhythm scheme, sorry, is AAB, AAB, and then CCB, CCB. Okay. Good. And obviously, once again, this slide will be at your disposition later. No, stop playing. Okay, so this is our first composer spotlight, which is exciting. And it's also like the shortest composer spotlight you will probably ever see. So this composer, his name is Munyo Daras. Okay, so you can see the date he was born and died. Obviously, he did not live long at all. This is page 25, by the way. But just so you know, like if they ever ask you about the composers in the Middle Age, I also included like an interesting picture of him. But anyways, if they ever ask you about the different composers within the Middle Ages, it would be important to mention him because obviously he's the first not anonymous guy that we are listening to. We're studying his songs. So he was a monk. Okay, so this means he was dedicated to like an abbey. If you guys, yeah, he was dedicated to an abbey in French. He wrote both sacred and secular music, but his secular songs were based on modes. Okay, this isn't in the textbook, but this is like a known fact. And he was a trouvère. Okay, so he lived in northern France and he was a trouvère, one of the last that we know. So that's pretty important. Okay, nothing else there is worth noting that much. Okay, awesome. So let me go to the next slide. Let's move on to dance music, okay? So dance music. We have this unit and then a second unit, and then we're done the Middle Ages, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit more about different things we want to do. So dance music is super duper important. Obviously you can see that unlike others, they have like 2 pages like solely dedicated to like what dance music was or is rather, because it's still a thing. But let's talk a little bit more about it. So this is where instrumental music made like a big appearance. People were like, okay, like we want to dance to like music other than a person's voice. We want to dance to guitars. We want to dance to flutes. We obviously they didn't have, it wasn't called that back then, but they were just like, we want to dance to lively instruments and music. So they were like, okay, let's just create them. So that's what they did. And this is where, if you want to read the entire paragraph, sure, but the key points is that, like I said, sacred music was notated by the Roman Catholic Church, okay? And instrumental music was performed by people who weren't part of the church. So they were seen as less educated and illiterate. Because back in the day, if you didn't go study at the church, you probably didn't know how to write. You probably didn't know how to do basic math, you didn't know a lot, okay? And you were not educated. So essentially with instrumental music and dance music, people didn't know or didn't see the need to preserve the music like how the church did, because they didn't know how, they weren't educated, and they certainly didn't know how to preserve music, let alone like words, okay? So yeah, the church, they're basically super strict. They're like, no instruments, please, except for the organ. And they thought secular music, that was like for the common folk, you know, they kind of looked down upon secular music and how the regular, less educated people would sing it, and it wasn't like holy and to God. Obviously, that's an interesting viewpoint. That's not exactly the most healthy. Okay, some key words here. Instruments were not standardized. That means they were constantly changing. It's not like now we have a piano and it's like that's the piano. That's exactly how it is. Not one more, not one less key. Back then they were like, "Oh, hey, let's just add an extra key like for fun." I guess. Probably they didn't have pianos like point blank back then, but that's an example. So, like I said, organs, the Roman Catholic Church liked organs, but that's about it. And they were passed down through oral traditions. Like I said, it was like one person would sing the song to their kids, and then they would sing it to their kids, and etc., etc., etc. And I already said the rest of these things. If you move to page 28, okay, so this is very important. I think you guys should all be on page 28 right now, and you should look at this intense graph. You have to write all the definitions for the words with the asterisks next to them. So that's like the sackbut. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. The sham, the lute, the dulcimer, the VA, things like that. You should write that in the definition at the back of the book, like as soon as this class is over, just so you remember it. Okay? But just so you know, like generally, the instruments were classified into two different categories. One of them, as you can see in on page 28, was the O, which means loud. So this is like the things that were very screechy and loud. And I like to think of it as like O means like the flute. If you've ever heard a flute, that's what they thought it sounded like. And then the Ba means like the softer instruments. So this to me sounds like I don't know, like a soft guitar versus like a piccolo, right? Like so kind of not screechy, that's mean, but very high pitched, loud because you have to be loud for it to be heard. And then ba means like a soothing guitar, things like that. Okay, cool. Let's move on. So let's continue with the background and origin. So that's what I just told you is about the instruments within dance music and like how the Roman Catholic Church didn't like it, but regular uneducated people who didn't have an education with the church liked it, and they developed indoor and outdoor instruments. But now let's talk about the background and origins of dance music. So, firstly, it was based on a tradition of improvisation. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. If you don't know what improvisation is, I'm slightly worried, but in case you really don't, it's when you come up with music or songs or different melodies on the spot without having written it down or having like played it beforehand. Okay, it was functional music, so it was for like social dances. So if people were like, oh, townspeople were like, oh, let's have a big party and let's all dance, then this is the songs they would play. And obviously 13th century, we'll get into that later. That's not exclusive to the dance music. Okay, let's talk about characteristic features. It's largely monophonic, okay, and it's based on model melodies. It's pretty similar to what we just learned with the chanson, okay, but this chanson is more about singing. This is more about like danceability and things like that. Okay, and last thing, as I've said before, improvisation was important. So the accompaniment, you'll hear different instruments. They were improvised. So people would just pick up an instrument and start playing, regardless of whether or not they practiced, whether or not they fully knew like what they were doing. They just did it for fun, which is an interesting approach to music. Last but not least, I promise this is the last thing we will talk about before we listen to a piece, is the chansonnier du roi, okay? So this is where dance music was stored. So if you've like been listening for the past hour and a couple minutes, then you realize that like for some reason, every single genre, so we started with Gregorian chant and then the motet and then the organum, the chanson, and now the dance music, they were all stored in a place and they were like in a big like database for like all kinds of books like that, right? So the big database for the dance music was the Chansonnier du Roi. And if you remember, there's like the Musica one that was for organum, Ars Nova, things like that. Make sure you research more into that or like reread the book if you missed them. So this was Chansonnier du Roi means songbook for the king. Okay, so It was French, obviously, and it contained like trouvère, as you can remember, the trouvère north of France, songwriters, and it also included 8 monophonic dances. We will learn the monophonic dance of Royal Estampie number 4. Okay, so this is the dance music they were talking about rather than a regular chanson. Okay, let's get more into this. So this piece, Royal SMP number 4, is from the big database. I'm gonna call it a database, but that's not, don't quote me on that. That's just so you guys can understand. It was from the big publication book called Chansonnier du Roi, but it's anonymous. So I'm now on page 29, the bottom half of page 29. And if you didn't know, the SMP is a stately dance. So it involves a lot of dancing, like rigorous body movements, and it's suggested, and this makes sense to me and will probably make sense to you once you listen to it, but like when you're stamping your feet, yeah, oh no, you're stomping your feet, oh geez, so when you're stomping your feet, that's like very lively. People associate that with like, oh, dancing, a bunch of different cool stuff. So they suggest that Royal SMP number 4 means like royal stomp number 4, which is an interesting approach to it. Okay, background information. Genre, dance music. If you have not noticed by now, we are talking about dance music. Composer, anonymous. The composer is not Chansonnier du Roi. Chansonnier du Roi is the publication. That is not a person. This is an anonymous composition. Okay? It was composed in the late 16th century. So we're moving along. Okay? Now we're in the late 16th century. Performing forces. There were a variety of them, right? So if we look at the page 28, there was the musical vocabulary. It was interchangeable between any one of these instruments. The mode, it was suggested that it was Dorian mode. This isn't on the textbook, but it is on the RCM website. So it was suggested that it's Dorian mode. Texture is monophonic, and the form, sectional structure with open and closed endings. Okay, pretty simple, pretty easy. Yeah, this one, I feel like RCM forgets about certain songs on the exam, and they only test you on a select few, and this one unfortunately is not one of them, but don't quote me on that, and read about it more. So we're on page 30. There's a bunch of definitions. Those are very good for you to write down. And on that note, I want to play this piece for you guys. Okay, that's all I'm going to play for you today. But obviously, if you are listening, you can hear a lot of different sounds and a lot of different instruments within that piece, which can be interesting to analyze and re-listen to on your own time. So, some quick little pointers. There's not that many, so we can move on to the mass later. But it's Dorian mode, or it suggests Dorian mode. Okay, as open and closed endings. You could see that, like at the beginning. Okay, wait, you can't hear it, but at the beginning, it had like an individual, like little instrument playing, and then over time, it started overlapping not overlapping, but different instruments joined in or replaced one another, and that's good for the musician to like repeat because they were improvising, remember, or to conclude a sentence. They often added embellishments. This isn't represented in the sheet music, obviously, but if you ever listen to it very keenly and you're like listening for it, you can hear that they just go, they just do whatever they want with the embellishments, and it sounds like fine because we don't actually know how it's supposed to sound like. And it's a relatively narrow melodic range. This is where if you look at the sheet music, you can tell like, yeah, it's pretty narrow. They're not really doing any giant leaps at all, except for at the beginning. I guess they would consider that a giant leap, but not really. Okay, perfect. So that is dance music. I feel like dance music, it's the song isn't, the piece isn't as important as like what dance music actually is and how it evolved. So that being said, does anyone have any questions before we move on to the last unit for today? No questions. Belle, Emily, Jessie, Coco, Kathleen, do you guys have any questions? Okay, I heard someone unmute, but I'm gonna assume no. You can type it if at any time you have any questions, just literally just type them in the chat and I will respond to them basically right away. Okay? Good. So if everyone is sure they don't have any questions, let's move on. So we have 30 minutes left. That's good because the mass is the most important unit you will learn today. Okay, it's just super duper important. I did not write the opening paragraph. You can read that on your own, but basically it just talks about how it's very important in the Roman Catholic Church. Obviously, I told you guys that a little bit at the beginning, but this is where we will get into more details. So if you recall back to the Gregorian chant, I told you guys that the Gregorian chant was in like the mass, okay? And I told you it was part of the gradual part of the mass. So if you look on page 31 at that little chart there, you can identify where the gradual component is. So it's the fourth down and it's a proper rather than ordinary. Okay, so it's in the mass, like I said. Let's talk about the background and origins. This one, honestly, it's the most important, but it's also the most straightforward unit. Like, you guys probably know what a mass is. If you don't, then you'll probably pick it up very easily. So the mass took form of monophonic chants. For example, the Heck Dies, the first song we listened to from the Gregorian chant and the Gregorian mass. So remember that was monophonic. So that was the earliest example of mass. It was just one single line, okay? Yeah, served as the basis for Organum. You already know this. You already know that Organum had the cantus firmus, which is what the Heck Dies from Gregorian chant was for the Organum. And it was the first complete polyphonic setting of the Mass Ordinary, okay? So that was Messe de Notre Dame, which we will listen to in a moment, okay? So, characteristic features. It's the most important service in the Roman Catholic Church. I've said that so many times now. You probably already know this. They are, yeah, okay. So they change according to the church calendar. If you look at the chart, the musical components of the mass, you see they're divided in two. One of them is ordinary, meaning it's unchanging, and the other one is proper, meaning there's like a variable, meaning that it can change at some time. So obviously you see the gradual there. It is variable, meaning it can change. Okay, and that's it. That's basically all I want to say about that. If you want to read more about it, take more notes about it, that's cool. Yeah, question.
So what do you mean by like it's changeable or it's unchangeable?
Okay, basically what I mean is that if it was ordinary, unchanging, that means that there was no variations allowed. That means that the church wrote that piece and they're like, you cannot touch this. This is set in stone. You will never change it. But for other things such as the proper, they were a little bit looser with it. They're like, oh, if you want to change a few things to make it sound better, to make it resonate better with the church, if you want to, for example, take the gradual, take hecdies, which was part of gradual, and change it so that it has like an organum version and things like that, then you're able to do it. Do you understand what I mean?
Okay, I see.
Yeah, so one of them you just could not change it at all, which was the ordinary, and one of them they're like, sure, if you want to change it a little bit, you can, and we will not yell at you for it. Or rather, we won't be mad at you for it or anything like that. Okay, good question though. That was awesome. All right, we're on page 32. Oh, and here's the chart again if you missed it. So gradual is here, and Kyrie, I bolded it because we will be listening to it right now or in like 2 minutes. Okay. So, page 32, you can build your musical vocabulary. I will not go through any of it with you as I've said in the past, but Ars Nova. Okay, I'm telling you guys, Ars Nova, you will be quizzed on this, okay? On the exam, you will be asked, like, what is Ars Nova? Or, like, who was part of Ars Nova? Things like that. I will tell you both, the answer to both of those. So, in the 14th century, as you can tell, dance music was in the late 13th century. So as we moved along, sacred music became less popular. People were like, oh, come on, like we don't want to always be listening to sacred music. Let's have a little bit more lively music. Let's become a more secular society. So it was less governed by the Roman Catholic Church. And basically what Ars Nova was, it was a treatise where a guy named Philip de Vitry described the changes that were happening in music and art. So he told us that in the past, the people were super religious. People wanted their child to go study with the Roman Catholic Church. People didn't want to learn secular music, didn't write secular music. And then he told us basically through Ars Nova, through like a bunch of different like treaties, which are basically documents, that over time people were like, this is not a great way to live because we just want to have fun. We want to sing nice songs. We want to play instruments. We just want to have fun and be happy for the limited time we will be alive, since obviously the plague was a thing back then. So that's basically the shift. And Ars Nova is the one who directly told us that this shift happened. Without Ars Nova, we would have never known. We would have just been like, we could have inferred, but we would have never been sure. So Ars Nova, super important. Okay. Last thing about it, it represents a high point in the development of music in the Middle Ages. So it foreshadowed many changes to come in the Renaissance area. What this means is that it foreshadowed more secular music. It foreshadowed people wanting to play music that was like based on sacred music. For example, like Organum is sacred, but they're like, hey, maybe we want to create a secular Organum. Or they saw the Motet and they're like, why don't we create a secular motet, things like that, right? And that's foreshadowing for what we'll learn next class. Okay, and then the most important person with Ars Nova, you should know his name by heart, is Mr. Philip de Vitry. He lived pretty long, but he was a French composer, poet, things like that. He was the author of Ars Nova. So he was the one who wrote that treaties that allowed us, the Ars Nova treaties that allowed us to understand what was happening back in that day, because or else we wouldn't know. He did a bunch of stuff. He broke free of older patterns and rhythmic modes. He used isorhythm, the repetition of like extended patterns. So like we'll see that later, but basically if you want to research more about isorhythms, they're pretty interesting. Okay, cool. I hope you guys are following along. We're on page 33, and we will learn the last piece. I keep saying song, but it's a piece for today. It's called Kyrie from Messe de Notre Dame by a guy named Guillaume de Machaut. So this song was not written by Philip de Vitry. Philip de Vitry wrote Ars Nova. Guillaume de Machaut wrote Kyrie, which, if you recall, is one of the parts, the unchanging parts of the mass. Okay. This, I'm not going to read that little paragraph there, but I'll tell you what's important in it is that it was the first complete polyphonic setting of the ordinary mass by a single composer. What this means is that in the past they had multiple people working on sets of ordinary by the mass, and this one it was a single composer who just stepped up, did the entire thing, and they're like, oh wow, that's really cool. And the other really important thing is that this is when 4 voices were introduced in a piece. So recall back to I'm not sure really to the motet when there were only 3 voices, the triplum, duplum, and tenor. They got rid of that. Well, no, they didn't get rid of that. But for this piece, they thought, I want 4 parts. I want to have 4 different voices singing at the same time so that it sounds generally more complete. And we'll talk more about what that 4 voice is because it's not the bass like you would expect. Background information, again, honestly, you can read this on your own time. The composer, this is pretty obvious. The composition date, we know exactly when it was, okay? So it was mass ordinary, it was Greek, polyphonic texture, and here this piece has cantus firmus too. It's in the tenor voice and it's based on a piece that we didn't learn at all. We're not going to learn, but it's called okay, I'm not going to say it but because I can't, but it is based on another version of Kyrie before this version was set in stone forever. Okay, perfect. So if you can remember, the cantus firmus was always in the lower voices, the tenor voice, because of the fact that there were only 3 voices. But now what you're going to see is that the cantus firmus is now in the 3rd voice because of the fact that they added a lower one beneath the tenor, so beneath the cantus firmus. So if it's 3 voices or 2 voices, cantus firmus is the last voice, okay? So the lowest one. But if it's 4 voices, it is the middle one. Not the middle one, the 3rd one out of 4. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of things here. And if you look at the textbook, page 34, it's split into different parts. Now, what I did was that I grouped all the information, all the jot points into like one big chunk because I could listen to the song and like piece together which part they were talking about, which I think is the best thing to do. So on the exam, have like all these words with you because these will be important just generally, but make sure above anything else you can recognize the voice. If I played it like halfway through, you would know what it is. And so on and so forth. Okay, cool. Let me play it for you. This is the last piece I'll play. Oh, by the way, you can follow along. We're doing so measure 1 to 9. Obviously, it's right at the beginning. So if you want to follow along with the sheet music, you can. Okay, so obviously it's very long, but that's the first part which we talk about the most, okay? Go. So Page 34. Let's talk a little bit about the first 9 measures, okay? So if you look at it, it's based on Dorian mode and it's in triple meter, which is very interesting. Well, actually it's not, considering that each measure is worth 6 beats. So obviously 6 is a if you divide 6 by 3, it is a whole number. So that makes sense for it to be a triple meter. Okay. So isorhythm is employed in the tenor voice. So in the cantus firmus, it's employed. If you look at the cantus firmus and you recognize it, that's cool, because you probably should. It's wait, actually no, you shouldn't. Yeah, the cantus firmus comes from a totally different piece that we didn't even talk about. So if you're a little bit confused because you haven't done the musical vocabulary yet, isorhythm, for if you wanted to know, is a compositional device. Okay, so it combines patterns with like melodic patterns with rhythmic patterns. Okay, so melodic patterns with rhythmic patterns. So basically, if you can tell on the RI, there's a rhythmic pattern there that goes again and again, but there's also a melodic pattern. If you want to dive deeper into that, like I said, you can do more research. Okie dokie, what's next? Okay, yeah. And the last thing I'll mention here is that wide melodic leaps occur frequently. So they don't actually occur that frequently, but compared to the other songs we've listened to or the other pieces we've listened to that were very sacred, this has quite a few large leaps in quotations. Last thing, if you're wondering, if you go to if you go to measure 4, there's a hocket that occurs there, okay? And that means when you combine 2 voices to create a single melody. So here you can see it, it's at the end of measure 4. Okay, let's move on to the the lower part of page 34. So there's another hocket that occurs at measure 22. So right here, I'm pointing to it, but it's the 4th measure from the left. And this is where you can see the triplum and the motitus voices are overlapping, they're weaving, and they're creating a kind of texture. So this is where I'll just tell you very quickly that before, when we had the 3-part voice, it was triplum, duplum, tenor, and cantus firmus. But now it's a little bit different. It's triplum, motitus, which is the duplum. They're the same thing. They're synonyms of each other. The tenor, which is the cantus firmus, and now there's the contratenor, which is the super duper low voice that you hear. Okay. I don't think they're going to quiz you on that, but if you want to know, that is interesting to know. Okay. And then last thing, keyword, there's musica ficta. Okay, and here you will learn it when you do your building a musical vocabulary, but it's basically when performance raised or lowered pitches by like half a step or like a semitone to avoid undesirable intervals. So if they're like, oh, I don't really like minor third, they would like raise it up and they'd be like, oh, now I get a major third, or like a perfect fourth, or they'd raise it up enough or lower it down. Okay, so this is where musica ficta comes into play. All right. Oh, 10 minutes and we are almost done. Oh, geez. Okay, last person we will talk about is Mr. Guillaume de Machaut. He was an interesting person. Oh, he's not the one. Okay. We'll learn very interesting composers, and by interesting, I mean they had pretty sad lives. But he is super important. The first thing I will say, and this is the one you should like write it down and then like bold it. I say that for a lot of stuff, but anyways, he is the first composer that we have the complete edition of collected works from. Okay? So other composers, maybe they did one song, one piece, and then like we don't know if they wrote any others. We don't even know if they had a collection. Some of them totally anonymous. We don't even know who they were. Guillaume was the first person where we had every single one of his works. We knew his name, which in and of itself is quite amazing. We knew every single one of his songs, and we through time we preserved his music, which is really a testament to how highly they thought of this guy, because they're willing to go preserve his music through such lengths. Okay, so he was the most celebrated and significant composer of the Ars Nova style. Obviously, they allowed him to create a part of the Mass, the one thing the Roman Catholic Church valued above everything else. They allowed him to create that piece on his own. So super celebrated, super significant. He contributed to both sacred and secular music, though I will say he contributed a little bit more to secular music than to sacred music, because the only real sacred music he wrote was the one we just listened to. He used a greater variety of intervals. So recall that back when I was telling you about other pieces, they always used perfect four, perfect fifth, octaves, things like that. He was like, no, let's use third and sixth. Let's use a little bit of some interesting intervals to make the pieces more interesting and a little bit more enjoyable, I guess you could say. Let's see. Okay, this is important because they will ask him like which composer on the exam. They'll ask you which composer used syncopation, hocket, and isorhythm. So spoiler alert, it was Guillaume de Machaut. So he used syncopation, hocket, and isorhythm when he wrote his pieces. Let's see. He wrote his own poetry. That's not important at all. But he wrote both monophonic and polyphonic chansons, okay? So he kind of very loosely, he continued the Trouvère tradition. Okay? All right. On that note, we're done. We are finished learning everything I wanted us to learn today. I'm going to, before we go, can everyone open their textbook if it's not open already? This is very important. To page 36. And say like yes in the chat if you can see what I'm seeing on page 36. Review and reflection. Great. Okay, you guys have awesome spelling. I'm kidding. Okay, so this is very important. I'll send you guys the homework on WeChat and on the Google Classroom, by the way. Don't worry, I'm not gonna just tell you and then never let you know again, but this will be part of the homework because I want you to look at your notes, to look through the textbook for the first 36 pages that we learned, and look at it and then fill out the pieces that relate to the word they're telling you. For example, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, when they're asking for a monophonic texture, just go back to like any piece that we saw and then look at the background information. And I went to a random page and I already see a piece that has monophonic texture. So some of them are really easy to find and you should be able to complete the entire like list, for lack of better words, okay? So use of modes, syllabic text setting, melismatic text setting. Obviously, if you took notes, you can just command find on a Google document and you'll see which piece has those keywords in it. But if you really can't, if no one can find it, then I can give you guys my answers next class. Okay, on that note, the last thing I want to do is I will give you guys a document whether today or tomorrow. I haven't made it yet, which is great on my part, but I'm going to tell you the general things we learned today, and right now I'm going to tell you the things to remember, okay? This is not detailed at all. This is just very, very, very general. First thing, secular versus sacred music. The most important thing, no, not the most, one of the most important things you will learn in the Middle Ages. So secular music, who can tell me? I want someone to unmute their mic and tell me what sacred music is.
It's like music related to like God and Jesus and stuff.
Yes, very good. It's related to God, Jesus, religion. It's about the Bible, things like that. Okay, good. Good. Okay. And who can tell me what secular music is? Ideally not the same person, because I want everyone to.
Not related to religion, basically.
Okay, good. Yeah, really simple. So not related to religion, about things like love, like, oh, I love my dog, so I'm going to write a song about it. That would be secular music. Good. So you should know about the preservation of sacred versus secular music. Like I said, sacred music, the church wrote that down. They like preserved it with their life, but secular music, they didn't really like it because it was related to the quote uneducated people, which is obviously not very nice of them, but they did it anyways. And we learned different units today. We learned so many. We learned 6. Okay. So the Gregorian chant, the organum, motet, chanson, dance music, and mass. And you should be able to tell me like what, okay, how do I word this? What changed through each unit, right? So what did we start with the Gregorian chant, and what changed from the Gregorian chant to the organum, and then what changed from the organum and the Gregorian chant to the motet, and so on and so forth. And that should be pretty easy, because I can tell you right off the bat, if you weren't paying attention, you won't know, but if you were, you would know like right away. Oh, the organum did something to the Gregorian chant that made it evolve. Okay, third thing, cantus firmus. So Emily and Jesse, I think, already gave me an answer. So out of Belle, Coco, and Kathleen, who can give me a paraphrased version of what the cantus firmus is?
It's like a line of like a voice, like the tenor or something like that.
Yes, very good. Thank you so much, Coco. So it is borrowed material from another piece, and it's found in the tenor voice. Okay, like Coco said, that was awesome. Okay, so you have to, obviously there's a better definition in the book somewhere, but we didn't do that yet. So you have to listen to the songs that I played today. You have to, I know they're not the catchiest songs on the planet. Believe me, it's kind of tedious to listen to them, but you have to do it anyways. You have to be able, if I played a song halfway through, you have to be able to recognize it, because I promise RCM is going to pull that. They're going to play a song halfway through and you're going to be like, oh, like, what is that? Because you only listened to like the first 20 seconds. Okay. And then I literally gave the answer to what I wanted you guys to think about here, but Heck Dies is in 3 units. Starts with the chant, the Gregorian chant, the organum, and then the motet. Okay, do we have any questions, comments, concerns, anything? Absolutely anything.
Yeah, what's our homework?
Oh, okay. Okay, but actually I have a slide for that. Boom. Okay, so there's a lot of homework. I'm telling you right off the bat. The first thing I want you guys to do is, like I said, go to the glossary and look at the words. So here I see glossary, there's words like a cappella, the affections, agreement, aria, ars nova, ballet, things like that. We didn't learn all those words today, but I want you guys to write the definition for each, write the example for each, because I will quiz you on the first half of the words. So from a cappella to mass proper on page 150, I will quiz you for every single one. I'll ask you what they mean. I can't even tell if you're going to use your book or not, but you probably shouldn't, because this is for your greater good. And this Quizlet, super helpful. Okay, this Quizlet has all the information you need if you want to quiz yourself on it. If you like missed a word and you don't know where to find it in the textbook, pull up the Quizlet. They have everything you need. I actually used it when I was doing my definitions because I didn't want to flip back and forth between the book. So do that, and you will be good. Second thing, on the Google Classroom, I made a quiz of everything from the Middle Ages. It's like 18 multiple choice questions. Okay, yeah, it's multiple choice, which makes it a little bit easier because obviously I kind of went easy and you can tell which ones are wrong in some cases. But you have to do this quiz. It's going to be like 18 multiple choice questions. And then I'm asking you to write 2 essays right off the bat. I'm not gonna like judge you. I'm not gonna be like, wow, like you suck at writing essays, because that's not a thing I'm going to do, but I just want to see like how you guys structure your essays, how you guys use like the textbook, your notes to make like a well-rounded essay, and I'll give you a grade on it if you want. If you want a grade on it, I will release them and you will know. But multiple choice, that's just to test your knowledge. Page 36 in the textbook, like I said, it's the review and reflection. Fill that out really quickly. Just write them down. If you are really lost for one of them, skip it. This is like where I'm like, fine, you can do half of the words and then we'll pull it up in class. And then last thing is, what are the essays going to be about? Okay. I'll show you the Google Classroom and the essays like in 1 second. Okay, if you can wait 1 second. We're going a little bit over time. I hope you don't mind, but like we'll go like 5 minutes over time. And then the last thing I want you guys to do, this is arguably the most important thing, is that I have 6 songs on the slides, right? If you remember, I played them super, super briefly, but I want you to pull up like if you go on YouTube and you search up level 10 history RCM, there are so many playlists with all the songs you need to learn. Listen to the first 6 ones because I'm going to quiz you on them next class, which I'm actually not sure when the next class is. Let me tell you when it is. I'll post all this in the Google Classroom and in